Hello and namaste. Now we'll look at Satya, chapter 2, verse 36 of the Yoga Sutras. This is one of the 5 yamas. Truthfulness, Satya, or Sat, truth. So that bound by truth and integrity, everything that we do is bound to manifest. And truth may seem very easy, like, yes, I understand it. But now we need to dig a little bit deeper when we apply this yama to our ordinary life. So first, just think about, is it easy or hard to tell the truth? And is there some sort of myth in your life that you're perpetuating? Is there something that people think is true about you, but you know is not really true? And yet you continue to let them think that way. For example, maybe even in your family of origin, you're the eldest child. So therefore, the assumption is that you're always put together, you're responsible, everything is like in order for you. But the reality is that your life is falling apart and you feel overwhelmed. And yet you don't want people to know the truth, so you let them believe what they want to believe. Or maybe you are in your neighborhood considered to, again, be very well organized and everything's put together and you're in a happy relationship. But the truth is you're suffering inside that container of relationship. And that's happened to me. On the outside, I was allowing people to believe this myth about my life, and yet I was suffering in an abusive marriage. But it was more comfortable for me to let people think what they wanted to believe rather than being authentic and coming forward with my truth. The truth happens to be associated with the 5th chakra, the throat chakra. Communication, not only to say the truth, but to also listen and to receive. So really think about if in your life there's something that you're not saying, something that you know is true, but you're not allowing yourself to say out loud to other people. Maybe you need help, maybe you need support, maybe there's some aspect of your life that people are assuming is going well and easy, but it's actually not really. I find that to be true with clients that have had eating disorders past or present, and the resistance to ask for help and support because they believe that if others knew the truth about them, that they would be looked down upon. And so they're dealing with all this shame that's coming from the self to themselves when it comes to telling the truth and just letting people know that this is a struggle for them in this capacity. Or think about the person that's overworking. Think about the mom that's feeling overwhelmed. Think about so many aspects of our lives that we're instead choosing not to let people know what's true. And so then, are you really living the most authentic life? Are you really living Satya if you're not showing up in the most authentic way? You know, I'll give you the example that when people post on social media, that's not reality. That's not the whole truth of people's lives. Those little squares on Instagram are well curated for me and for everyone. And at least what I do is I tell people, don't believe that this is my whole life. These squares don't represent my entire life. But if you're watching social media and you really think like, yeah, that's the perfection of that person's life, and then something happens and then they come clean and they tell you how their life really is manifesting right now, and then you're in shock and disappointment, think about the times that that's occurred. Because we can only play at being authentic for so long before we need to actually step into being authentic. So in social media, it's a really great test of Satya. How much truth can you allow people to know about your life? I mean, clearly you don't have to share every private matter in a social platform, but are you hiding the truth? Is every single picture something that is capturing the right angles and the certain filters upon filters upon filters, that at certain point you don't even really look like yourself. And that's not what you look like in real life, because it's been so filtered out as to who that person really is. So think about all these insidious ways, like social media, where the truth is not something that we're accustomed anymore to supporting. And then I think about television, and I'll give you an example from the United States. The most popular shows in the United States are reality TV shows. But although they're not scripted, the editing can certainly make things, or the influencing on moving in one direction or another, can create certain storylines and can create certain situations. But that's not necessarily always the truth of how it came out to play, or the emphasis of what occurred. So one of those shows is a show called Survivor, and you win by lying, and so many of these shows, you win by lying. On The Bachelor, on The Bachelorette, you win the guy, you win the girl by lying about yourself, lying to the other contestants, and that's how you get ahead, is by lying. So we live in a world where truth is not necessarily the norm. Therefore, we have to, as yogis, work a lot more diligently to get to the heart of the truth, because we're actually supported in not telling the truth. We're rewarded to not tell the truth. If you want to win, you won't tell the truth, is the messaging and the social conditioning that usually comes about these days. And yet here as yogis, we are doing our best to instead uphold a higher standard, to be in integrity, that is part of the truth, to live into your non-negotiables, to set boundaries for yourself and be able, through the prism of ahimsa, to tell the truth. And from there, telling the truth first to yourself. For how many things do you not want to admit from yourself to yourself, let alone admit from yourself to others? Have you overstayed in a job that you knew was toxic for you? Have you overstayed in a relationship that you knew was not healthy for you? What is it in your life right now that you're not saying that needs to be said, admitted, and then actioned, if you're really going to live in integrity? And I've made all the mistakes, so I have no judgment, certainly. I've withheld the truth from myself. I've withheld the truth from my family. So going back to the personal example that I gave in an abusive marriage, I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell my brother. I didn't tell my neighbors. I didn't want anybody to know. I'm embarrassed. I'm feeling ashamed. And quite frankly, I was in survival, just trying to get through to the next day and just get through to the next morning even. That was a big litmus test. If I could survive the night and make it to the next morning, that was a big deal. And then praying that it would be somewhat peaceful to try to go to bed. But that's when I needed to tell the truth the most, is when I really needed support. And I know now that my family would have supported me, and my brother would have supported me, and my neighbors, some would have supported me. But where can you ask for some support right now in your life in a really honest way? Because if you want to live this path and live up to your greatest potential, do you really believe that you can do that by yourself? Do you really believe that this is all just a game of solitaire, and that you're just like meant to suffer, to sacrifice, and to do it all on your own? Because that's not the construct of the yogic path. That's the yamas and the niyamas. So think about where you could accept a little bit more and know that you don't have to do it all by yourself, especially if you want to live to your highest good and tap into your greatest potential. So the truth also, I suffered from what I call the good girl syndrome. And the truth came into play in that I want you to ask yourself, can you be too nice? Is it possible to be too nice a person? And do you think that that's like a really positive thing? So I'll tell you, the good girl syndrome or the good boy syndrome is to live life according to what everybody else wants you to do and not according to what you need or what you want to do. Prioritizing everyone else's happiness above your own happiness. And when that occurs, then yes, it's detrimental to be too nice. And I suffered from a good girl syndrome. I suffered greatly because I always referenced outside of myself to be seen as a good girl, to do the good thing, to do the right thing, to make everybody else happy, because that's what good girls and good boys do. And I lost myself and I lost my truth. I lost like the essential truth. Who am I? What is my identity? If other people aren't validating me and telling me what to do and what not to do, well then, who am I? And I honestly, I didn't know. I lost track because I was just too busy carrying the burden of being a good girl. And so when it comes to being too nice, yes, that's a real thing, because if you're being too nice and you're stuck in this good girl syndrome, good boy syndrome, you're not being honest. You're not being honest with yourself and what you need. And you're certainly not being honest with the people around you, because you're just trying to gain their approval and not actually show up as who you are and communicating in a truthful, honest way. So it does no one any good service to fall into the trap of what I call the good girl or good boy syndrome. And then the truth is also nuanced, you know. We always hold the truth in the yogic path in alignment with ahimsa, non-harming, to be kind, to be helpful in this world. And so the truth isn't meant to hurt someone just for the sake of hurting that person, telling them the truth and using and wielding it like an axe. I've experienced that as well in another abusive relationship that was verbally abusive this time. But they considered themselves a really high vibration, conscious man. And so they were like, yeah, I'm just telling you the truth. I'm just telling you the truth, so therefore I'm exempt from ahimsa, or actually thinking about, is this appropriate? And so the 4 gateways of speech are, is it true? First litmus test. Can it be said in a nice way, a kind way, like through ahimsa? Yes. Is now the right time? Maybe, maybe not. Is it necessary? Well, that would reduce a lot of things. And so he would just constantly tell me really cruel things under this guise of like, I'm telling the truth and I'm a great spiritual conscious person. But he wouldn't say it in a kind way. And even if it was true, it was really hurtful in the way it was said. And he would constantly find the least appropriate times to tell this like truth. It's like midnight, my head is on the pillow, and now there's like this terrible thing that he's telling me. And if we had just slept on it and he had waited until the next day in the morning, it's now an appropriate time. Okay, it's daytime. Is it necessary? I would say that 9 out of the 10 cruel things that he would come up with to say, he would never have said. Because that emotion of like hurting and lashing out, which was part of his anger management issue, would have just dissipated, if you know what I mean. And so he wouldn't say 9 of those 10 cruel, hurtful things. under this umbrella of, oh, look at me, I'm righteous and I'm a conscious person. So really apply these 4 filters in asking yourself, not just verbally, but I apply those before I send an email or before I send a text message or what have you. But especially with email, even in my corporate job, some of the best advice I got from my boss in Britain was take a lap, like sleep on it. Before you send that out, people are being very reactive. Instead of being super reactive right away, calm down, get to the truth of the matter through calmness, and then next day, see what is shaken out and then respond. And it was brilliant, brilliant advice, because then by the next day, 99% of all these things that were like problems had simply vanished. And people making unimportant things important, they realized their error and things just like quieted down rather than throwing more gas on a fire under this like, well, I'm truthful, I know the right way, and I am righteous in this. Just take a lap, wait overnight, and then see what's shaken out. Yeah. Another Buddhist parable is to not make things worse. So this is really great advice, not to make things worse than what they were to begin with. Because I want you to think about this. Would you rather be right or be happy? Would you rather be right or be happy? And for those that are overreactive with their truth, using it like an axe to wield against other people, and we know those people that are savvy that way, especially with their words, they would rather be right than to be happy. For me, I'd rather be happy. I don't need to say every single thing to someone or to parties or what have you. And so when it came to email and me taking this lap, I would come back and I'd look at an email I'd written the night before when I was like worked up and trying to be reactive rather than responsive to this work situation, because everything was always, in consultancy, everything is urgent and important. There's nothing that's less so. And I would edit, simplify, or most of the time, honestly, I would just delete it because it didn't really need to be said, and it certainly didn't need to be said that way. And I was just going to make things worse if I sent anything, the gas on a fire. Or I edited it down so neatly that, all right, now this is not trying to be defensive and it's not reactive. It's a response to be helpful, since we're all on the same team in this company and we're trying to get to the same result. So there's really practical ways, whether it's looking at your relationships at home or at work, and relationship with self, of course, as well. But when it comes to Satya, to truth, I want you to go beyond just this. Okay, I tell the truth, and very vanilla baseline, and I don't cheat on my taxes. Great, good for you. But there's way more. And when it comes then finally to the poses, are you honest every time you practice the asana? And not just every time, but are you checking in throughout your practice to ask, am I making an honest effort? For some of us, we hold back constantly. Could we actually, if we're being honest, like make a little bit more of an effort? Stay in that downward dog, just another breath, yeah? Instead of choosing child's pose before we even ask the question of ourselves, to ourselves, do I need child's pose? What's the truth? Am I tired, or is it now just a habit? And is it a habit of my mind? I don't think I'm strong, so I just go to child's pose. Or is it a habit that I'm going to assume it's going to be the same as yesterday and the week before and the month before and the year before? Because the truth is right now. It's not looking backwards. It's like happening right now. So in the poses, holding back is a way that we're not being honest. And when we're tired, we're like, we're not breathing well, we're not having fun, it's really stressful, then we're also not being honest there either. Where it's of benefit at those times to slow things down, to take a break, to turn into your breath. Maybe that's when you skip a connecting basic vinyasa. You don't need to do another push-up. Just take it to down dog and just be for 5 breaths and collect yourself and enjoy the moment, right? So there's lots of ways in our practice of asana that we can really see if we're committed to the truth or if we're just bypassing the truth. And that's the last one, is the spiritual bypass that I'll leave you with today. It is ridiculously easy to misunderstand these teachings of yoga and use it as an excuse to spiritually bypass, to get into the state of, it's all good, it's all good. How are you feeling? I'm great. I'm great. Because I practice yoga and I'm spiritual, I'm just always great. When you're not great, or something bad happens, like, no, but it's for my greater good, and it's for my soul's growth, and it's all gonna be okay. I'm learning these amazing lessons, and isn't it wonderful? I've lost my job. Yes, but that's not the worst of it, because I am gaining lessons and awareness, and this is a great thing, this loss of a job. And we just bypass the feeling and the true emotion. It's okay to feel really sad about losing your job. It's okay to feel really angry about losing your job, to feel worried, to feel overwhelmed, to feel disappointed, to feel aggravated, anxious. There's so many emotions that you might be feeling, rather than just bypassing all of those feelings and just pretending, which is not honest, that everything is fine just because you think you are a spiritual person and that this is the expectation of a conscious human. But it's not. We're meant to experience the full spectrum of emotion and to be honest with what we are feeling, to not bypass the shadow, because the only way is through. The only way is through. We can't avoid it and go around, over it, under it. We can't run away from it. Yeah, but the only way is to go through the shadow emotions, the anger, the fear, the worry, the sadness, and really face ourselves, maybe for the very first time. And so that is the expectation of applying this on an emotional level. Satya, truth, is to avoid the spiritual bypass. And now we're really going to make headway into our growth and our evolution when we finally allow ourselves to feel what we're feeling and face the shadow and move through the shadow and acknowledge the shadow. Thich Nhat Hanh has a beautiful story, parable, that he says, we're here, right? And you can hear a baby crying. So just imagine right now, you could hear a baby crying here. But I'm just going to ignore the baby. I'm just going to keep talking to you, just ignoring the baby. But the baby keeps crying. Baby keeps crying, minutes go by, and finally, at some point, our humanity will say, all right, I need to leave this room and go see about this crying baby. I know I can hear them. I'm going to go find them. Step 1, acknowledgement, awareness that there is a baby and acknowledging the presence of this crying baby. Step 2, what would you do? We all do the same thing. We pick up the baby and then we cradle it. Yeah? Because we're humans. And then step 3, what do we say? What do you say to the little baby? It's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. And so that's exactly what occurs. If you are honest with yourself, there are emotions that we're ignoring, like crying babies, like anger. And then the first step is to acknowledge that you're angry, you're feeling angry, and go and hold yourself like you held the little baby. Hold yourself and tell yourself it's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel angry. And in that moment, a transmutation, a transformation occurs. Rather than this anger taking over your life and making you sick, now simply by the awareness and the acceptance and the recognition, I am my anger. My anger is me. I am angry right now. It then dissipates. It no longer has this power over you because you've acknowledged the truth. There's nothing more powerful than Satya. Nothing more powerful. Because even the recognition of love is the truth. That love not only exists, but that love is the ultimate sustainable resource of the entire universe and beyond. So from my heart to your heart, I hope that this understanding and these talk stories about what Satya is are applicable to your life, and that you really take into consideration a broader view of how you can apply Satya to every aspect of your life. From my heart to your heart, may you love yourself, love your day, and love your life.